as the title should give hint to, we are going to talk about halfway through the month update, thoughts, perspective, inspiration, yada yada yada. I would like to first mention that on my blog every weekend I try to give a recap of the previous week, things I've learned, encouragement to share, and so on and so forth. That's going to be on sodbusterliving.com, and that's been one way I can help some people locally I know kind of share thoughts and perspectives. So today being the middle of the month, almost exactly, I did want to kind of go over some of the things that I've done in order to fulfill the challenges I've done, kind of talk about our month a little bit financially, especially because this was a little harder month and I've been trying specifically to stick to our income, not relying on what we have earned previously. I also would like to jump in and just really thank everyone that has reached out and said, I applaud you for this, I am encouraging you in this, you've really encouraged me in this. And those of you that have reached out saying, financially, can I step in and help you in any way? I want to address actually that last question that has been addressed to me. These videos were in no way, shape, or form made for the sole purpose of saying, look, we need help. That's going to be another thing that we talk about in this video is government assistance and some of the diet things that these questions keep coming up. That was never, ever, ever the intention. The intention in doing this is actually just something that I've long been waiting to do, years in the making, and it was because I had done this already years back, and I was getting a lot of questions during the recession on how I was doing all of this because it was very confusing and kind of just a different lifestyle, a different mindset. And it was kind of confusing, or I think it was just different and not something that you would typically think of. Catherine, can you turn that down just a little bit?
Yeah.
Christmas music in the background because Christmas music is awesome. I think it's beautiful that y'all have done that. I'm not sitting here upset by it or uncomfortable. I think that it's a good sign that, hey, people are open to helping those within their community, and I think that's actually where the help really needs to start, is within your own community, your own church, and that kind of goes into why we won't take government assistance, and that's a big part of it, is because look up national debt. And look up what the government brings in taxes, which is mainly the taxes are what help kind of sustain the government and keep the government going. It's not that the government is a nonprofit and we donate to the government. So look up our national debt, our nation's debt. Look at, just research basically what the government brings in taxes, and not just certain taxes, but you need to look at all the taxes that it brings in. And look at what goes out of our nation. So nation's debt, what our nation's expenditures are, and then what it brings in with all the taxes that it handles. And most of the time, the citizens of the United States, their taxes cover the interest that we owe in our debt. If I am on here sharing my journey and how to stay out of debt, because I don't believe in debt and I think that Americans should not have debt insofar as possible, then I don't want to be a part of that. I would like to be a part of the solution, which is to live within my means. And if that is my platform, then I don't want to be a part of it. Right now, we are on government health medical care. So it's kind of hard to say, well, here's one thing, but, and that really, we don't have any kind of health care. We can't really afford any kind of health care, and we're still trying to figure out a solution to this problem. Obamacare kind of threw us in a tailspin. A lot of times we were paying out of pocket, but Obamacare kind of threw us for a loop, and I believe President Trump has repealed the penalty for not having insurance. But we have had a couple instances where we were many thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars in medical debt, and Medicare stepped in and covered it. And we did that because those hospitals needed to be paid somehow. For all the stuff that they had done, we knew that they needed to be paid somehow. The doctors that were working on us needed to be paid somehow. We can say we'll pay it, but that is going to take a very long time, if ever in our lifetime. And it was kind of a pros and cons, which is the better pill to eat. So that's why we don't take government assistance at this time. I think Erin Odom, who wrote More Than Making It, I've done a video review on that, I think, or a blog post, I don't remember. She talked about how they were on government assistance, and I think that her book is actually beautifully written. And I'm not going to get on here and say, well, we don't believe in it, so nobody should do it. No, this is kind of one of those conviction things, like head coverings. You need to be convicted about it, and that has to be between you and God, you and your husband, you and your family, whatever it is. Like, our convictions are not to be put on you. Okay, that is actually my exclamation point on the matter. So you need to figure out, and if you're like, you know what, it means more to me that my kids get good, healthy, nutritious meals, so I'm going to go down to the office and get food stamps, then that's what you do. Because in the end, that is your decision that you have made with your family's best interests at heart. And you do that. But this is where we stand. This is why I've had, why I wanted to address that question. The other one that I wanted to address had to do with, well, I'm very confused. Are you guys gluten-free or are you not? You say you're going to eat this, but then you go ahead and eat that instead. So this might get a little TMI, and for those that really don't care about things like this, I'll leave a timestamp right here so that you can just jump ahead and skip all of this. Yes, it feels very back and forth. It's a very conflicting thing dealing with food sensitivities. It's not necessarily allergies. Years ago, my husband, he was having horrible joint pain. His stomach was constantly upset. Life was very painful for him. In his gut, in his hands, his brain fog was through the roof, and his depression was really bad. And he was actually trying to figure out a way to help his depression. When he researches things, it's usually to find a natural solution to help his depression. And the hand thing was getting so much that he was having a hard time doing his job. And he was researching. This is about the time when the internet kind of started taking off. So 15 years ago, I want to say. Because it was very shortly before we got married, and I would say within a year or two of us getting married was when he really just went for it. He grew up with a perfect 1950s mother who ground the berries, made whole wheat bread, whole 9 yards, made her own noodles, made her own everything. The perfect 1950s wife, and he ate all that growing up. He lived on goat's milk from the goats that they milked. Okay, so, but his pain was just becoming so much. So he cut out gluten. It was one of the first things that his research had found. He cut out gluten, and he had almost a night and day transformation. His arthritis dropped to almost non-existent. A lot of the gut pain that he experienced went away. It didn't go right away, but it was months to a year to 2 years of being very consistent and very daily following this, that he saw the biggest change. It wasn't an overnight thing. Except I think for the arthritis. I think the arthritis was very quickly. He saw the difference very quickly. I think that's what kept him going. But the gut pain, it was like 2 years. And if I remember correctly, your stomach rebuilds itself or repairs itself, like completely goes back to a healthy gut every 2 to 3 years. Not necessarily your gut, but maybe your intestines. It might be your intestines. So it makes sense why it took a while for that to go on. But anyway, then I got married and I was like, well, I do wheat. But he also didn't do whole milk. He grew up on goat's milk. We had a free goat's milk source, so we used goat's milk. And it was then that I realized that it wasn't normal to be doubled over in pain after eating breakfast cereal with whole milk. Again, you just grow up with it. You don't really think anything of it until you're like, wait a minute, this is gone. And it was because I hadn't had any, but I got pregnant and I just wanted cereal for breakfast. That's all I wanted. And so I was eating again with whole milk. And that's when I realized that, wow, I haven't had this kind of pain in a year. And it was due to not having milk. So then we have these two things kind of going at us. But I still ate wheat, just not when my husband was home. I just made everything gluten-free when he got home. And then we had our first kid. And I was noticing that when I did have wheat, this is where it gets TMI, I was noticing that when we did have wheat, her diapers would be kind of mucousy and bloody. And I was like, that's not normal. And I would cut out wheat from my diet, and her diapers went away, or her issues went away. I'd bring it back. I always knew when I got something that had wheat in it, because her diapers would show up with this stuff that I was like, this is not normal. I mean, I helped change my siblings' diapers. I know this is not normal. Baby number 2 came, same thing. Baby number 3 came, and he had a terrible ear-piercing screams. The scream was so bad that I would actually lay him in the room and have to leave because my ear would hurt so bad. And we couldn't figure it out. Someone said, oh, it's just colic. And I'm like, no, the kid's in pain. Like, you can see it's just this tightening and everything. It's just, he's in pain. And we cut out dairy completely for me. So a lot of my coffee stuff, cut out dairy. A lot of the Starbucks, cut it out. And he became a completely different kid. The cheese, all of it. I also, at that point, lost more weight than I had done in any kind of diets, any kind of thing. The weight was easily coming off, and it makes sense if the milk, I couldn't handle it well. About that time, I was noticing that beef, now that all of this dairy is out of my system, I was noticing that beef would make my stomach hurt so bad after I ate it, and I would be in pain throughout the night. And it was kind of like, it's a gassy pain. Okay, we're in a TMI issue anyway. I would just have really bad, horrible, tightening pain and gas every time I ate beef. So with that kid, I gave up wheat, beef, and dairy. That's probably why I lost so much weight. What did I eat? Actually, if I don't eat, I gain more weight, but that's another thing. That's completely unrelated. So now we got up to the 5th kid, and at this point I'm like, okay, wheat just doesn't work for us. When we ate more wheat, when we would just have times when I'm like, okay, funds are short, let's just do wheat this week. Behaviors go up, misbehavior goes up. The kids are just more, it's almost like this out of controlness with them, and they're short-tempered, they're just whiny, they're just completely different people. And I know that sounds such a stretch, but what people see with kids that get like red dye or something, I actually see if my kids get more sugar and more wheat. And about the time that my 5th kid, I was pregnant with my 5th kid, I had so many issues nursing the previous 4 that I said, if this kid, if what I do now and 1 month into nursing, I'm still cracked, bleeding, and screaming in pain to nurse him. I'm doing formula. I'm going to find a way and I will do formula. And I gave up sugar completely. I have a systemic candida yeast infection that I can't seem to clear up despite anything that I do. Any diet, I've done it all. The oils, the diets, the medication, everything. I've done it all. If I can't get this under control, then I'm not going to nurse him. And at that point, I had given up sugar. I noticed for me a huge shift in my moods, my hormones, different things when I had given up sugar. My migraines, a lot of it had gone away. So now we're in this family dynamic where beef doesn't sit well with me and all of these things. You already know that we have some gut issues that affect behavioral things when it comes to wheat. My older children, and actually I would say about the older 3, really insist that wheat doesn't affect them. But I noticed that my daughter gets more cramps. My 2 other sons just get more silly, and the bathroom's taken up longer, and so there's that. And then throwing in beans. Now, if we thought my husband's stomach pains and my beef pains were anything to write home about, throw beans into it, soaking, long soak, cooking with apple cider vinegar. Throw those into it, a steady diet, and they are very miserable. And the rest of us are miserable because we want the windows open. So that's when I talk about these kinds of things, it's not just an uncomfortable or something like that. Like, it is physically painful. And you don't want to associate eating a nutritious meal with being doubled over in pain. So when I talk about those things, that's kind of what we experience. It's also why I try to cut down dairy. It's also why I try not to do too much wheat. It's why I do try to get beef for my husband. He's type O. He's so skinny. Like, the really solid beef iron he really needs. But we noticed that certain foods, if they affect my husband, not just in his gut, but in his emotional and depression kind of triggers, then there's a good chance that it will affect our kids just because they have this same DNA. And so that's why that, I know that's a very long explanatory of all of this, but that's why a lot of that is the way that is. I'm just trying to be careful. Okay, so all of that aside, I'm trying to think of some of the other things. Christmas, like, what are we going to do for Christmas was another one. That will be another video. I'm going to try to see if I can get ahead of myself, knock on wood, and start showing you some Christmas ideas that I will be using. I'm not just going to show you things that you can do, but that I'm actually using and how I'm choosing them. So that'll be another video because I think that'll be a very long one. And I kind of want to keep this as short as I humanly can. Insofar as our pantry challenge, that's going to be something, I'll try to keep this simple and sweet. I know that I almost feel like this should be a 2-part thing. One with all of the needs or the medical issues, and then the rest. The eat your pantry things. So we're about ready to go on lockdown again, and we're starting to see across the United States food shortages happening again. And I would love to go to the store and start stockpiling, and insofar as humanly possible, I have been. I did start out this video kind of talking about how we do have money in checking, again, from just accumulation of summer paychecks, and so that has really helped, but trying to share how people live day to day, and honestly, we've just seen that checking account dwindle so quickly in the last year, so quickly. Last week, just before my husband left, the night before he was going to leave for his pastor conference, I get a text from him that says, we need to get 2 new tires on my truck ASAP. So they're pretty much on, they need to be replaced. Now, I wouldn't be freaking out so much about this if the fact that my mom had replaced 2 tires recently in a car saved her and my sister's life. There was a horrible accident, and she was on the way to the airport to pick my sister up, and one of the tires blew, and the guy at the tire shop said, "You have to replace this other one." And I was like, "Well, my daughter's at the airport. I need to get her." He's like, "No, please, just do this." And so she did. My brother was able to get to the airport and stay with her until my mom could get there. But doing that saved them their lives. They were able to stop and spin away from this flaming car and were saved by God's grace and mercy. And so my husband says, "I've got 2 bald tires. I need to get tires ASAP." I'm like, "Get to the tire shop and get those tires. I do not need this to happen again." So now we've got $250 that needs to come out of the paycheck this month. And if we had been starting from scratch trying to build up a savings account, this could put us in the negative, right? Well, looking at it this way, remember I had said, hey, let's try to do a men's game where we're decluttering our month, kind of preparing everything for Christmas and saving money for that. Before I heard about the tires, I was like, well, maybe I could use this money to actually kind of restock the pantry, because I have a feeling that's what we're going to need to do. And then he's like, I got to get tires. And he's, bless his heart, this poor man is working hard. He's still trying to be in school, and now he's kind of thinking, wow, how am I going to sustain supporting my family in this way? And I was able to say, I've got the cash, let's do it. And so God works out those little details, something that I was just thinking, oh, this would really help encourage the channel viewers, and who doesn't want extra cash? Let's try to do this. And I was able to put this together. Because of that, and because I really want to restock my pantry, guess where all the Christmas money is going? So let's talk a little bit about this. That came up, the tire thing came up. We had when I did the budget with you earlier this month, we had talked about how we had a little under $250 for groceries. Like after all was said and done, we had $250 left over, and I just kind of said we're going to set it aside, and if we need something we can get it. And so far, in the middle of the month, November 16th, we have spent, November 16th, we have spent $250 in groceries. You have, you should see the grocery haul I did this past weekend with Sam's Club, but if not, it's forthcoming. And then this Sunday, my husband went in and bought oil for the van that desperately needs it, and some things for the van that we need to kind of get on. And oil is not cheap. So at this point, we really don't have an envelope for maintenance, repairs, and all of that. So I think it's time that we start one, and we'll just figure out how we're going to do that. But anyway, that all brought our total to $250. And we only had like $247 something for left over for this month. So technically we were negative $2.56. Here's where God says, but I am that I am. We got, I just looked at the electric bill when I was making this. I just looked at the total. I didn't read anything. I didn't do anything. It was my husband that pointed out that our electric bill is null this month. So the $98.76 that we would have had to pay, we don't have to pay this month, and we don't have a bill next month. The reason for that is when we first moved here to Indiana and got a home and got the electricity going in our name, we had to start a new account with us. And you had a $250 deposit to do that. It was outrageous and ridiculous. So we put that down, and then we would get basically our bills. Well, after a certain amount of months, apparently they give you that money back by not having an electric bill, or your electric bill paid until you've reached that 250 threshold. So as of right now, we're probably good up until January, as long as we keep the heater off. So we're really blessed in that. So now we have a surplus of a little extra money, which is going to help because already the fridge is pretty empty. The pantry is getting pretty bare. The freezer is still stocked on meat, and so thank you, Jesus, that is going pretty well. But, and again, I've had other people say, well, why are you trying to clean up the pantry? Like, that doesn't make sense if you're just going to have to refill it. That's going to cost you more money in the long run. I did it because this was going to be a really tight month, and I just really needed to try to buckle down and save any money that I could, and obviously it did. And I have had issues with food getting old and nasty and having a harder time rancid and things like that. And I just want to make sure that that food is getting eaten up and new stuff being put in. So that really was, in essence, just making sure that all of that food that gets piled up gets used up. That was a big one, and another one was just really to try to save as much money as we could this month. Not necessarily for Christmas. It was, the Christmas idea was more for you, the viewer, who are trying to come up with Christmas money. Okay, so I think we have kind of gone over a lot. I have been keeping track. It's like scribbled out thing. Actually, I think if we do this. It's a very scribbled out page, but I've been keeping track of all the things that I have sold and money coming in that help cover my little jar here. Actually, this was getting, so I had started with trying to, okay, earn $3, I'll check day 3 off. I have $30, I'll check day 30 off. But it was actually getting really hard to keep track, and I kept ending up with more errors. And so I restarted another page, and so I have little notes to me down here like, okay, you have $16, actually it's $14. I needed to borrow $2 last night for eggs because we had no eggs, and I really needed some eggs. So we have $14 left over. I am a day ahead thanks to somebody that's sent me randomly a PayPal. It's like, this is to cover this day, and it was, thank you. So I am a day ahead of everything, but we're now into day 17, days 17, 18, 19, 20, all of the big number days. So, insofar as selling items to bring in income, I honestly don't think we're gonna get there. But even still, I think we have like $200 in that Christmas envelope. Nothing to sneeze at. Very, very thankful for that. I had a piece of paper with everything that I wanted to address in so far as possible. No spend month. So again, that video I have been sharing down below, and today I bought a coffee, and my sister sent me $5 and said, hey, I want you to go get a coffee. It's something that I normally would do, but I just can't do it because you're so far away. Shame on you. Go get a cup of coffee. And I was like, part of me was, I should wait until the end of this month. Just save it for that so that the streak isn't broken and that I keep continuing with a strong record. And I didn't. I did go and buy, and it was interesting to me how quickly part of it is I have children that just are like, ooh, this looks interesting, and they go and they drink. And it's very frustrating because I'm like, this was my treat, that you just drink half of it. Especially when you get an iced coffee. Like, the ice takes up most of the coffee. But the other thing I learned was that it was such a fleeting enjoyment. Like, once it's gone, it's gone. There's nothing there other than the enjoyment of having something delicious. There's nothing wrong in that. Actually, I am one that advocates when you're so tight on your finances and you're penny pinching and you're doing all these things to go and do a treat. Buy a brownie mix, buy a cake mix. When you're pinching those pennies, try and find a way to do that. Do something, because it really bolsters. It really helps you kind of stay motivated and keep going and not feel this of it all. Do you know what I mean? So I'm totally advocating it, but it was, to me, it was, hey, if this was a daily thing that I was trying to get my happiness from, of going and buying a very, going and buying a very expensive coffee just to kind of feel better about myself, yeah, I felt happy for 5 minutes. So it would have been better if I had had that money and had saved it and done something like, we really need tires. Oh, honey, we got this. Here you go. I talked about this in another video of one of my childhood favorite moments was a video called The Glenn Miller Story with June Allison and Stewart. Everybody loves Jimmy Stewart. In The Glenn Miller Story, Glenn Miller is trying to figure out how they're going to start the band. He's like, well, if we get a truck and we get this and we got to do that, man, it's going to be, and then he names a number. And June Allison, his wife, turns to him and says, oh, that's great, then we're all set. And he's like, no, honey. He says we need $2,000 or something to start it. And she's like, well, yeah. And she turns around, she goes and she's like, here you go. And she hands the bank book. And he's like, we have the money. She's like, yeah, eat your dinner. Have fun. And he goes and he's like, how did you do that? And it was just her. She takes all the change out of his pockets and then just puts them in a bank and watches it grow. And then when it was needed, she pulled it out and gave it to him. Loved that story. And I was able to do that this month. And do you guys know how happy that made me? How happy it made me that, yes, I had the cash in my wallet to go get. Yes, I could have gotten that $5 overpriced $5 cup of coffee. But because I chose to say no, I chose to just be content and happy in going home and making my own cup of coffee, I was able to take this amount of money and hand it over to my husband and say, go get the tires. Like, that is an unbelievably joyful moment that you get to experience. That's why I keep doing this. That is why I keep trying to share with you these moments. If you're building an emergency fund, this would have been a great time to put all of that into your emergency fund. If you are dedicated to giving your kids the best Christmas you can have, this was a way to do it without putting it all on the credit card. Those little times of saying no, and being happy with what you have bubble over and create this momentum. Lost my momentum, had to save a kid or save a book from a kid, something. Anyway, this is why we do these things, right? This is why we can have the heart of our husband safely trust in us. I'm going to leave it here. I hope this video is encouraging. Keep going at it. We're halfway there. This is actually the hardest point, like to keep that momentum up. We've done it for so long, but we've got to keep going. Go ahead. I just want to leave you one final thought. It's something that I heard as a child, my mom talking, I think with my dad one point. And she was talking about a study that JCPenney did. And JCPenney did a study where they were noticing people's habits. There was 2 things that came out of this study. Go! The first one is that people tend to keep their habits for 6 weeks and then revert back to old habits. And so you know that 3-week rule, it takes 3 weeks to break a habit. It's going to take 12 weeks to continue your new habit. Keep going. And I think even The Power of Habit talks a little bit about that. So don't give up at the end of this month. Keep going. Keep being strong. Really think about your purchases, especially during the season. Like, this is where we get really tight, you know, in January, because we got to pay off these bills, we have to do all this, and we have to recover. Well, let's get ahead of the game and let's really think about that. The other thing that JCPenney noticed is that if they brought the price up on an item and then declared it a sale, more people would typically buy it. Sales used to be the, okay, nobody's going to buy this, we got to get rid of it kind of thing. Now sales are like, we got to get people to buy this, let's have a sale. So those are the two things that JCPenney learned from this study. So don't be a study statistic. Let's be above that. Let's be content in all things. Let's be minimalism at heart, because what we have is what has been given to us, and we need to take care of it to the best of our abilities and appreciate what we have before we start adding more and more to our lives that we can't keep up with, enjoy, cluttered, so on and so forth. I hope this video is encouraging to you. Keep going. Again, we're in the final stretch and we can do this. And so far as how we're going to continue on with the No Shelvember, I'll have to update you later, because honestly at this point I don't really know myself. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.